Hello there, Mad Mike here, and welcome back to the channel. Um, just today, I want to cover a news story that's it's been bouncing a lot around a little bit, but I wanted to wait a day or so before I started talking about it, just because I wanted to see, how people kind of reacted to it, and I also wanted to watch the video myself and kind of be able to dissect it a little bit. And it's about an roughly 11-minute clip from the Collider Movie Talk podcast, I believe. And Collider is, for those of you who don't know, Collider is a site that reports on film news. Sometimes I look on there to see what's up. Usually I use Screen Rant. But they've kind of been at odds with people recently over a lot of Star Wars stuff. Ever since The Last Jedi came out, John Campea is kind of the king of that department essentially, but a lot of people have been bashing the various members of the Collider team, including Kristian Harloff, who had a meltdown on air the other day over something involving over not getting an official invitation to Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, which is opening up, I believe, at Disney World in Florida. And it's basically a Star Wars theme park. Now, the first reactions to this were, people calling him an entitled baby, unprofessional, and yada, yada, yada. And then after that, things kind of cooled down a little bit, but basically people, it, it came off very bad. And Collider, it there are a few issues with this, and I'm going to kind of go through the various stages of this video, from him just kind of commenting on certain things to him going into full meltdown mode. Now, from the only reason why I'm kind of reporting on this, not just because Collider is a news site that does specifically movies, is that Kristian Harloff is a reviewer. He's somebody that reviews films, and basically he has been called part of the shill media. And he starts off at one point in this video listing off that people scream at him for being a shill and he sucks Disney's dick and all that stuff basically, and he basically he goes. The fact that he mentions it in the video shows that it kind of gets to him a bit, and he even mentions the fact that he is butthurt about not being invited, and it's personal to him now. Now, look, I'm going to say this once, and I'm only going to say this once. Should he have probably been invited to this premiere? From what I understand, no members of the media were invited to this. He mentions two writers from Collider both went, one of which had connections and was able to bring a friend who was also a writer at Collider. So those people might have not been going as necessarily people that were going from the press. They had connections, they were going to go there and they were going to get interviews, but they were not necessarily people of the press. They were people that just had connections. And the other thing that people were kind of pissed about is the fact that he goes on and basically says the Jedi Council has been representing Star Wars for 5 years, and all that stuff. And basically he puts out his entire his reasoning on why he should have been invited. Now, some people came out and basically said that this is him essentially throwing a temper tantrum, and it is. Um, and honestly, Disney is a corporation. They are a massive corporation, and if they say, yeah, we're not going to invite you to this, it's one of those things you just kind of have to accept. And it's a weird thing, because if you look at it, and this is might go into my own personal philosophy on doing your job and that kind of thing, but if you do your job and Kristian Harloff's job is not to be a shill for Disney. Kristian Harloff's job is to be a film reviewer and to talk about movies. And the fact that they didn't want to give him a press pass to go there doesn't mean that he does his job badly. It just means that Disney did not want to give him a press pass. And the fact that he is favorable to Star Wars should not immediately grant him a press pass. Uh, to think that you would record, to think that just because you say I love Star Wars, or or something, something to that effect, again, I'm kind of going off on a little bit of a tangent, but to say that because you are favorable to Star Wars and you have a large viewer audience, means that they have to send you a pass to go to this big Star Wars thing, is ludicrous. Now, what should happen is, because he is part of a major news outlet, if they are not going to give out complimentary press passes and they're not going to invite him, they should manage to get some people in there, which they did. They got the two people from the writing team in there, and they're going to be able to report back. Now, it is this leads into the next part of this video, which is very cringy, but Kristian Harloff's job is to report on film news and to review films. It is not his job to, again, to suck Disney's dick, essentially. So when it goes into the next tangent is when his producer comes on the line, and there's like a cut between the two cameras. There's a behind the scenes camera, and then there's a camera on the room. And the producer comes in and basically says that, Kristian Harloff says, I'm not going to report on it, essentially because he's butthurt about it. And his producer then comes on and says, no, he is going to report on it because they're going to have information and interviews with like Imagineers and stuff like that, the people that make the stuff at Disney World. And it's going to be a part of the show, and he is going to report on it. And then Harloff proceeds to go off about how the producer is coming on the air, and they could have talked about this off the air. Now, here is the thing that should have happened in a professional atmosphere. What should have happened is Harloff shouldn't have aired his personal grievances with Disney on the air, because that is stupid. If he wants to air it, here's the thing that we all do. And if you say that you don't do this, you're either in a boss's position or you're a suck up, one or the other. We all complain about our bosses. Every single person that is listening to this has complained about their boss. I have complained about my boss. But you don't do it to the boss's face or when the boss can hear you. Now, the producer is in the studio and listening to the podcast, and Harloff knows that he can hear him, and he knows he's probably going to get shit later. And that is extremely unprofessional. Stuff like that should be handled behind the scenes. He shouldn't be airing his personal grievances against something. Now, if you want to report on something that seems egregious and you want to give your personal opinion on it, if it's a subject or something like that, and you want to say, yeah, that doesn't sit right with me for X, Y, and Z, you have to give a logical argument, and it has to be something that's safe for being on the air, depending on what platform you're using, or, what company you are employed by, or, whatever. I can say fuck because I don't care, because it's just a random YouTube channel, and I don't make any money off of this. But Kristian Harloff is part of Collider, which is a media company, and he is in a studio at work. He is at work, and he is basically airing his personal grievances that he has with Disney because they didn't send him a press pass to go to Galaxy's Edge. And trust me, I don't think he's going to lose an arm and a leg if he wants to go to Disney World and go see it. It's kind of ridiculous for him to get that butthurt about them not sending him a press pass. It is extremely ridiculous for somebody to go to that amount of an extreme. But then it just gets escalated when he gets into the fight with the producer. Now, the producer basically goes back and forth with the producer for a little while, and it is so cringy. And you can tell that there's three other people in the room with Harloff, and I couldn't tell you their names if you paid me money, but those three people looked extremely uncomfortable, as well as the guys that are in the booth, because they switch camera angles. So there's two guys in the booth with the producer, and then there's four people, including Harloff, in the room doing the podcast. And this is where it stops becoming professional in any sense of the word and turns into something that is completely personal. And everybody is saying that, oh no, this is we're seeing the true Collider. No, what you're seeing is somebody who is cracking around the edges very seriously. Now, the thing is that, and this is just speculation on my part. When this stuff happens a lot of the time, and we see people like freak out or go mentally insane on air. Now, I don't think Harloff went to the extent, he didn't necessarily pull a Christian Bale, but it looks as though there are some cracks around the edges. I don't know if this guy has a lot of stress issues going on right now. I don't necessarily know what's going on in his personal life, nor should I. But it feels like there were a lot more reasons behind this than just Disney did not send him a press pass. It seems like he might be dealing with some shit right now. So I'm not necessarily going to blame him for getting pissed off that they didn't send him a press pass. It's like, look, if you want to be pissy about it, be pissy about it. Vent in private. You know, there are times when you are not on the air, when you are not recording something, when you're not live, and you can just you can vent to your wife, vent to your friends, vent to your coworkers. That's fine as long as it's not on the air. uh, but he chose to vent on the air. He chose to air his grievances on the air and say he would not cover this, despite the fact his company was telling, he knew that his company was going to cover it and he would have to talk about it. That is where the first string of unprofessionalism starts. Then his producer basically checks him on air because he is being so unprofessional. And I don't blame the producer for this. I really don't. I don't blame the producer for coming on the air and bitching at him and like not taking him aside in private. If you wanted it to get taken aside in private, you would have aired your grievances off the air. You wanted this to be public. That he wanted it to be public. That he was pissed about it. But otherwise, he wouldn't have talked about it on the air. So this just kind of strikes me as, everybody says, oh, a lot of people are saying like, oh, this is what Collider really is. I don't necessarily know if that's what Collider really is. I think there are probably people that work at Collider that are probably good, honest people that are not John Campea, because John Campea is kind of a douche. But you know, I think that they seem like they're relatively decent people. They seem like they know a good amount about movies for the most part. I don't. Again, there are a few culprits, John Campea. But aside from that stuff, it seems like they're okay. But this seems like this is more of just a personal thing with Harloff. And again, it's probably because he has been, look, he listed at the beginning, I get called a shill and a Disney whore and stuff like that all the time. And again, it's one of those things. If you can't let that stuff get to you, if you let what people tell you get to you, assuming you're not just shilling yourself out to Disney, if those things are untrue, then who cares? It's just something that a bunch of trolls said on the internet. Who gives a shit? There's no reason for anybody to care if somebody says that to you if it's not true. However, if it is true to some extent, then I can understand how it gets to people. Because if it is true and people are saying it and you don't want it to be true, then you're going to get pissed. I mean, especially if it's something like that. It's like, oh, you're a whore at Disney. Well, who cares? Like, everybody's a whore at Disney. I'm not, but there's a lot of other people that are. Again, John Campea. But, nobody really cares. And, he, again, like I've said repeatedly, John Campea gets a lot more flack than Kristian Harloff does, especially from Star Wars circles. So I really don't see why he would get so pissed about that unless he was actually shilling for them and he knew he was going to, he honestly believed he was going to get these no matter what. Like if they didn't invite anybody else, they were going to invite Kristian Harloff and the Jedi Council Collider guys. So, you know, it's this entire thing was unprofessional. If I'm going to say anything about this whole meltdown, it's that Kristian Harloff was extremely unprofessional in this. Now, does that affect my interpretation of his opinion on certain things? Certainly, anything Star Wars. Anything Star Wars related, I don't think I would really trust his opinion at this point because it seems very skewed. Um, but in terms of other stuff, I mean, honestly, as long as he makes a decent logical argument, I have no problems, believing what he's saying. But now there are issues where if this becomes a reoccurring thing, then he's gonna lose credibility. He's going to lose a lot of credibility, more than he's already lost. But if he shuts up, if he keeps quiet about this, and says, okay, I was having a bad day or something, then yeah, and just lets it blow over, then he'll be fine. He'll keep going. They'll be on Collider, and nothing will change. I've looked at Jedi Council's numbers. They get about around 50K per show, which is pretty good. Which is pretty good, but they have 567,000 people that are subscribed to them. But it's just kind of a weird thing to see from a critic, because the other thing is that you have to maintain to your audience is, when you are a critic of something, you have to be able to be trusted in the field. And I went over this in a previous video where we had somebody who was a critic who came out, I believe he worked for Sci-Fi Wire, and he basically claimed that there was favoritism in the industry and stuff like that. And he basically came out and claimed everything that we kind of already knew went on behind the scenes. But this is an entirely different ball game at this point with what has happened with Harloff. Now, I used to watch Harloff when he was just, one of the Schmoes Know, which was their YouTube channel, which was Kristian Harloff and Mark Ellis, and I actually liked their reviews. Their reviews were fairly good, but now that they've kind of gotten bigger and bigger and bigger, you see that there is definitely a change where Harloff, now, especially after this incident, is coming off extremely childish and entitled and stuff like that. And I don't necessarily blame him to an extent, because I'm sure Disney has given them passes to go do other stuff before, advancements for movies and stuff like that. But Harloff, again, is mainly a movie guy. So even though Star Wars is a film franchise, it's something that's related at a theme park. So I can kind of understand why maybe they wouldn't think to invite him. I don't know what these other two writers from Collider that he claims got passes to go. I don't know what they write for. Maybe they write for something more related to a theme park type of thing, or attractions or something like that. That are related to stuff. Maybe they're more qualified than him. I don't know. But at the same time, you know, this is just one of those weird microcosms of things that maybe this was just the perfect storm of events that Kristian Harloff just cracked on the air. But you know, this is something to look out for now. We've seen this stuff with people like movie Bob Chipman, where he went off the deep end after a certain point. This could be Harloff going off the deep end, and I think if people keep an eye on this, it's either going to blow over. He's gonna lay low a little bit, and things are gonna blow over, and maybe he'll get kicked off Collider for this. Who knows? He's obviously has some disciplinary actions against him at this point for arguing with his boss on the air. But then, or this could be this could be his decline into insanity. He could just start lashing out at people now, and become a Twitter troll like a lot of other guys. So only time will tell. But this was a very interesting thing to watch, just from a critic standpoint, just to see somebody who who is a fairly successful critic just kind of just lose his mind on the air. But I want to know what you think about Kristian Harloff. Do you think that he should have aired his grievances on the air with Disney, or do you think that maybe this was something that was best left behind the scenes and we didn't see? Put in the comments what you think. I always like to read them. Remember to hit the bell for notifications, put a like on the video, subscribe, and remember, I live my life free of compromise. Do you?